Maybe I look him over, but he's going to record it too. So this is working? Okay. Hi, I'm Dave Anders. I'm going to kind of go, by the way, there's no logo here, so there's going to be a logo contest. John, I asked for your logo, so I'm thinking like a cactus or something. Okay, just quickly, some of these things in here, the diagrams is what we use. We own them. SecuraStar, iCertWorks, ISO Manager. We're actually 3 sister companies here. You can't use them, you can't reuse them or anything like that. There you go. This is me. I actually own all 3 companies. I've been in the business for 20 plus years. I actually got started in risk management, working for insurance companies. Then I worked on international reinsurance, arbitration for like Lloyd's of London. Then I got into ISO 27001, which is management system. It's fairly related because we're talking about risk here. It doesn't matter if it's underwriting risk at a bank or underwriting risk in insurance or cybersecurity or that kind of risk. We're all kind of dealing with risk and what we're going to do with risk. So I've been in the business for quite a long time now. I own these 3 companies. SecuraStar, we're a niche ISO 27001 consulting firm. So that's primarily the driver between everything that we do. We do a few things off of 27001, but are related to 27001. So 22301, that is, so ISO 27001, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but that is the information security management system. It's the international standard for that. 22301 is related to 27001 because 22301 is the international management system for business continuity. Okay, that's one of the properties of information security. So those are related. 9001 is often related to that too because we're talking about quality on quality management systems as it integrates with information security. So for instance, if you're a software company and you do software development, they'll sometimes do 27001, but they'll also do quality on the production line for software development. Okay, so we integrate those 3, 27001, 22301, and 9001. Also very highly related these days with 27001 is Cloud Security Alliance. We actually do the Cloud Security Alliance audits through iCertWorks. Okay, that's very related to 27001 because if you don't know about cloud security, that actually leverages 27001. In other words, you can't get cloud security without 27001. It's impossible. Cloud Security Alliance uses the 3 ISO audit standards to manage their audits. Okay, so in other words, you have to be a certification body to even do the audit and issue the certifications for Cloud Security Alliance. Cloud Security Alliance does half of the audit days of the stage 2 part of ISO 27001, half of the audit days of the stage 2 audit for 27001 is the requirement for cloud security. Okay, so if you had 4 days for stage 2 in ISO 27001, you'd have a minimum of 2 days audit for Cloud Security Alliance. Okay, so there's a lot of relationship there. Also GDPR, and GDPR, that's privacy in Europe, and 2718. This is another one that we're very involved with here. This is the middleman between these two. 2718 is privacy in the cloud. Okay, so you're related to cloud security here and GDPR. So we have privacy, we have cloud security, and then 2718 is privacy in the cloud. And that's another one that is related to 27001. They all leverage 27001. Okay, anyways, ISO Manager, international software company. That's just to manage the management system requirements of 27001. So we have that, and then iCertWorks. We do about 65 different training courses. We're heavy in 27001. We're the largest provider of 27001 training, lead auditor, lead implementer in North America for PECB. PECB is the largest 27001 trainer in the world. Okay. We also do a lot of other training courses. We do, actually one of our biggest clients is, we're one of the, why listen to us? We do actually work with some of the biggest companies in the world. There's been some talk of here, it's kind of interesting, Medtronic. So we built the whole system for Medtronic for 27001. However, we're talking about 27001 management system we built for them. What does that mean? It just means that we built a system for every subsidiary to pick and choose what they want. But every subsidiary does it decides for themselves what their scope is, what controls they want based on what their products are. But one of the things we'll talk about in a little bit here about 27001 is it's very flexible. So that doesn't mean they have to put certain things in place. It just means in ISO world, they get to choose what they want to do. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And that doesn't mean 27001, even if they're certified, is the world's greatest system. It doesn't mean that the defibrillators can't be hacked. It doesn't mean that. Okay. Each certification gets to choose for themselves what they do with risk. Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Here's a couple in town here that we do: Axway, InfoArmor. Okay. Let's start from the beginning here. I know a lot of you guys are in cybersecurity, you're operational level. We work on the management system level, okay? So it is a management system, and it really means that. It really means that we're talking about management decisions here, not what's happening down on the operational level. Those are two different things. And what I want to do today is help you guys understand what the relationship is between it. Why am I doing those things? Why am I doing cybersecurity? Why do we have those controls? And those are decisions that management makes, and then you're executing them down on the operational level, okay? Those are two different things. Okay, so anyways, let's start from the basic. Information is an asset, okay? Like any important other business asset, it has a critical value to the organization. Actually, executive management, everybody, this takes you back to my reinsurance days, has a fiduciary duty to protect the information assets of their clients, okay, or their shareholders, or what we call interested parties, okay? They have a fiduciary duty, okay? If you're familiar with directors and officers insurance, if they don't do their fiduciary duty, they can actually be sued as a director and officer of the company for their own personal assets. Their own personal assets, okay? So they have a fiduciary duty. Information can exist in any form: electronic, physical, verbal knowledge. ISO 27001 is not an IT standard, okay? It's information in any form. And we've actually done certifications for companies that physically transport important information between point A and point B. That's it. That's all they're concerned about, is picking up that information and transporting it. In this case, the Harry Potter film. They were doing the trailers for it. And they were worried that the Harry Potter film might get stolen by somebody during transport, because it's worth $1 billion, right? Okay, so it doesn't have to be IT. IT is usually, but it doesn't have to be. So, for instance, we can certify in ISO 27001 a secure conference room, just like this one, something like this, with no computers, right? Because what if the information I'm telling you is so valuable you can walk out of here with it in your head? How about a stock trade? What if I told you something right now and you go out and make a stock trade? That's information, right? So I might have an NDA for you. The government has insider trading laws, which says you can't go do that. Okay, so information exists in any form. What are we dealing with? That's what matters, okay? Every company is doing something else, and if somebody is doing a secure conference room or picking up information between point A and point B, or they have IT or software, that's up to them, okay? So it can be all over the board information. Information has three main attributes: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Okay, everybody thinks about information, they think about somebody's going to steal my info, right? My confidential info. Not true. It could be just as important. Integrity depends on what you're doing. And availability could be the most important thing to somebody. Okay, we do a bunch of network companies. Network companies can see almost zero, or I guess I don't know one that can see any of their clients' information. They can see if their networks go down, but they can't actually go in there and see confidential information of their clients. So when we do their risk assessment for a network company, guess what their biggest concern is? Availability. Their job is to keep their clients' information available. And that goes with software companies too. So software companies might have both. Or you might have a software that collects all kinds of information, but it's all public, in which case it's 24/7. This is their biggest risk right here. They got to make sure that they keep the information available 24/7 worldwide, right? Okay. So when we do threats and vulnerabilities to assets, we're going through different threats and vulnerabilities to all of these different things, and they're going to choose controls on whatever affects them. And they might say, I don't have any risk. I don't have any risk. I have a lot of risk. What am I going to do about it? Okay. Those controls then are pushed down to the operational level, and that's when you're doing cybersecurity controls and things like that. Okay, so what is information security? According to 27001, the international standard, it is the preservation of CIA of information in any form. Okay? So what's 27001? In every standard, ISO standard, it's the first standard in every series. You'll see the one here that are the management system requirements. Those are the ones that you get certified to. Okay? 20,000 will change here too. They're updating all the standards now in the process of doing it. But when somebody asks you what 27001 is, you can simply say it's a management system. In this case, it's for information security because it's the 27,000 series. Security, business continuity, the oldest one and the most popular one that was ever is to date is 9001. Quality management systems. Okay, ISO 27001, a couple interesting things about it. They are generic requirements. The reason they're generic requirements is because they're international standards. Okay, that means they have to be applicable to any type or size company in the world. 10 people, 10 million people in the company. Doesn't matter. Same requirements. So if they get too prescriptive, that means somebody wouldn't be able to get certified to it, right? So it's very flexible. A lot of options to do here. There's two main parts to ISO 27001. All of the international standards, once they're updated, will have clauses 4 through 10. Okay? ISO 27001 is the only ISO standard that has a control catalog. It's called Annex A. There's 114 controls in Annex A, and they're generic. They're mid-level generic controls, and I'm going to show you how we use those to map to GDPR in a little while here. GDPR and Cloud Security Alliance and things like that. Okay, what's the goal? Obviously, the goal here is standardization. We want to standardize the management system requirements, and we want to standardize the control framework that everybody maps to. So that you can imagine if you worked for a security company and you went out, you were sending questionnaires out of people doing business with you, and one person goes, well, I comply with HIPAA. Here's 150 HIPAA controls. And one person says, well, I comply with GDPR. Okay, ISO's saying, okay, you can do all those different ones, but everybody's got to map them all to Annex A. Because if everybody maps them to Annex A, we're all operating on the same control framework. Does that make sense? So we actually use Annex A as the middleman, then we map out to all those other ones. But the goal here is standardization. Yeah?
So just getting to what I was going to ask, do you provide the mapping from, say,
yes.
or
in our software we do.
this, and as a client company comes in that's using one of these other control sets,
Yeah.
you can adapt and
There's a couple options. We map ours out ourselves because we own our own software company. So we map our own out to Annex A, all those other standards. However, there are companies that you can buy it from. One of them is the Unified Control Framework, and you can look that up. Unified Control Framework, UCF, and that's ones like Archer use that. We don't use it for our software because our software is ISO 27001. We have to map to Annex A, so Annex A is our middleman. We're not going to use another Unified Control Framework to map out, because then we'd have to map out Unified Control Framework, then to Annex A. See, so we just use Annex A.
so that you don't have to do things twice and you can.
Exactly. Otherwise, yeah, I think I have a diagram in here. I don't remember. I think I have a diagram here. I'll show you kind of what it looks like. But I'll show you where the UCF would be used, like in Archer or LockPath or something like that.
A couple of years ago, Sam's put out a poster that mapped across the spectrum.
Yeah. Some of them do them. The problem is standards get updated all the time. And yeah, SANS does it. A few other, like, you know, the ones that really kind of are aligned with the international standard, they'll do it. Like Cloud Security Alliance does it. SANS does it. Sometimes you'll get some of the other standards that'll do it. And yeah, and they want to be relevant outside the United States, so they'll do an Annex A mapping. And most of the world uses Annex A. Yeah. Okay, so this is our view of ISO 27001. It's not perfect, but it's just the way we explain it to our clients. So before they changed the mapping to 4 through 10, it was 4 through 8, and they used to use Plan, Do, Check, Act. Some people have probably heard that, or you've heard that in high school or college or something like that. That is just quality management in a cycle, right? A continuous improvement cycle. You can see here it still exists. Let me see. Oh, it works there. Okay. So this used to be Plan, Do, Check, and Act. They actually did away with it in like 2011 when they remodeled 22301, and then now they've redone it for all the standards. So we just split it up here, 4, 5, 6. So there's Plan, Do. They split it up, Check, and Act, but they actually don't use that terminology anymore in ISO. Okay, so here's what I'm going to go through really quick here. Let me just make sure what this slide is. Okay, so scope here. We're talking about, this is, as I told you, what you decide to scope for the certification. That means what is going to be auditable or not auditable within your organization. The scope is very important. It's the first thing that we do with any company we sell. We can't give you a quote to implement ISO 27001, we can't give you a certification audit quote unless we know what your scope is. Because how many assets are in scope? Are there 5 laptops? Is there 500 laptops? Is there 1,000 servers? Is there 10 servers? We don't know. We need to know all that. How many locations do we have? All of those things are important because we might need a business impact analysis or a business continuity plan for each location.
When you mean scope, you have something in writing that you give to them? What's the minimum requirements? Or
Well, if scope is a generic requirement. I don't know if I.
You're going to know how specific are you going to be with them?
Do you want to see a slide on scope? Do people want to see what it looks like? So scope is a generic requirement. And how we typically do scope, this is, everybody does it differently, but how we like to do it is a business process. Okay, so scope, and we like to do a business process, which you could also call a information life cycle, right? Okay, so here's a good way to think about it, or how we think about it, I should say. You can do scope. You can scope your whole company. Some people actually do that. However, the problem with scoping your whole company is when all assets are in, all assets are auditable, and the question is, do your clients care about all assets, your internal assets? And the answer is no, they don't. Certification does not give any value to your internal company, really. Okay, so here's what we typically do. We typically say this is a business process, okay, and it's usually a product and or service that you sell in which you are entrusted information of your clients. They're buying this from you, right? Of your clients. So they're buying a product or service from you. They're entrusting that you're going to protect CIA of their information that they provide you or that they're buying from you. And that's what we typically want to scope right here. So we're going to say anytime. So here's where the life cycle comes in. Make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so we have all kinds of things that interact with this business process, okay? But we're just going to say it's only our business process that we sell, that we make money with, that we're entrusted with our clients' information. We could do the whole company, which is everything the company does here. But let's just say we have help desk, right? We have a help desk, we have sales, we have accounting, okay? We also have some other ones here. Let's just say we have IT, right? Service delivery. That's our own IT. What else we have? We have human resources. Maybe we have software development. Now let's just pretend we're like Microsoft, something like that. Okay. It doesn't necessarily. So here, when we're doing a life cycle, IT is doing some things internally here, right? It's providing accounting with passwords, account access, help desk. The question is, do these services have access to the information, CIA, to the information you're entrusted with within scope? And if accounting doesn't have access to the client's information or related to that CIA, then what we're doing here is there's no value to this. Because then we'd be including accounting assets. And what I mean is, the people would have to be checked to make sure that they had NDAs, that IT, when they, the computers might have to have data encryption on them or something like that. And see, this doesn't really give value to our clients. So typically, we're talking anytime IT touches the scope, okay? T is anytime the IT, and Microsoft's a great one because Microsoft has their own IT department, right? They provide their own IT service delivery to the other subsidiaries and they charge them for it, just like a third party, okay? So in this case, we'd say, oh, this is Xbox. When IT service delivery works on Xbox and touches these information assets that are related to the client info, this is auditable. This isn't. When IT service delivery does something for accounting, this affect the info for CIA that we're entrusted with, and so on and so forth. So we're just talking about the assets that are in here. Anytime human resources hires somebody within the scope, let's just say there's 100 people in scope here, these people all have to have, if you've decided this now during the risk assessment, these guys all have to have an NDA. They have to have a criminal background check. They don't necessarily have to have it for these people. Now maybe they do it across the board, but all we're saying is if these people are in scope, these are auditable within the certification. Does that make sense to people?
Now, you
Kinda?
can that out by the scope of the questions and stuff. That you
Yeah, and another great way to think about scope is, what would my client sue me for as it relates to CIA? Okay, so if they couldn't sue you, that's a good question, is whether should it be in scope or not. Should you audit it? Because the certification is only given value to the scope for your clients. And then if you do it right, you're going to have defensibility. So if they take you to court, then you're going to say, well, hey, look, we scope the business process. Anytime somebody touches this, we do criminal background checks, we do data encryption, right? Encryption, we do whatever. And we can defend ourselves as well. So does that kind of make sense? I know it's kind of scribbly here, but right? And here, let me, I'll do it one other way here. It's this, this is kind of right here. So when you sell something, information comes in, right? So somebody touches it, personnel. It also might get data input onto a server. So right off the bat here, we have risk to 3 different things, right? Personnel that are interacting with the data right when we first interact with the client. We have data input. We have integrity, right? Data input. We have integrity right here. It's going to sit stored on a server. See? And then let's just say step 2 is we back it up. Then it goes over here, and this person touches it, and that person touches it. That's a cycle, see? And it's great to do a business cycle for 27001 because then it just goes wherever the information goes, see? You're following the information. If you just said, hey, I'm gonna certify the IT department, and your company is not IT service delivery, if your IT is just one little piece here, like we were talking about over here, if your IT is just one part of your company and you're a software company, this doesn't do a whole lot for you. This says that anytime IT touches anything, it's in. What if this is the mailroom? Do your clients care if you are certified for when your IT department touches the mailroom computers, if they have no access to your client's information? See, there's no value in that. So we don't like doing we like keeping IT out unless the company's job is IT service delivery. Could certify their IT service delivery department.
IT typically provides your network. And I noted that all the time you mentioned servers and anything else, you didn't mention the network it flows from.
It's just, I'm just using one example
But
here.
I'm just saying.
It's all over. It can be anything here. It could be software development. It could be network. It could be physical, environmental security.
Well, the interesting thing that when we audit, in, for example, credit cards, scope being the real important thing because basically the companies want to confine yourself to the things that touch. Okay?
They touch it, yeah.
But we also have to concern ourselves with things that can affect the security of it. So, for example, there's like second, third order effects. So you say the mailroom, but then let's suppose the mailroom is actually tapped into the network. Let's suppose it allows remote access. Let's suppose remote access
Then it's in.
is secured. Then it goes.
Then it's in.
Yeah, and so that's my point. When you got a network, it's very difficult to basically say,
Right.
to eliminate things because they touch it, therefore they allow access. If I get access, can I route my way? And so that requires that you really do really phenomenal
There's a lot of
segmentation to do.
There's a lot of discussion that goes into figuring out the
Well, I
scope.
was just
This
trying
is a
to
strategy.
keep
This is
IT out of it because I think keeping IT out of it is impossible.
It's not impossible. We do it all the time
No,
because IT can provide a service for the whole organization, right? Okay, well, if you're doing, let's just say you're doing Xbox, you're not going to do Microsoft's whole IT department. They provide services to every division. So
if I'm auditing a particular division of Microsoft, for example, let's suppose that I'm concerned about the fact that Microsoft accepts credit cards for things that it does and everything on this line, and they've asked for an audit of the credit card stuff, then one of the things you're going to look at is how that network that supports them is in fact isolated from everything else, or if it's not. Because some companies don't have that. They're
Right.
flat, and therefore everything touches them.
that's part of the discussion.
Okay,
That's
well,
part of just deciding what it is. And you're right, it can be different with every company. A lot of
That's
small
what I said.
software companies now don't have networks.
Yeah, but I'm just
At all.
basically saying you can't really generally make a statement that you can exclude IT because of
This is different with every company. So is CIA. This is different with every company. And keep in mind, one of their ideas would say IT service management has to get certified, right? That's one of the things you could say internally. Okay, we've decided that if we're going to buy the services internally, you're going to be certified, or you could put that on a third party, but we have things called operational level agreements. So when we do keep those people out, we have an operational level agreement. So we say, what do you provide to the scope? And then within that agreement, that third party agreement in scope, we'll say, you have to do this. Anytime you touch the scope, you have to do this, you have to do this, and it's a contractual agreement, and then they audit them. In fact, it's a requirement of ISO 27001 to audit any third party, including internal third parties. Okay?
For instance, do you have a master cybersecurity or information system security policy?
Exactly. Yep. And if we create a policy, we can actually apply it to them too. We can say, here's what we need you to do. You're related to access control policy. You have to follow our access control policy anytime you touch our scope. One of the requirements of all management system is called control of documents. And control of documents is a requirement for ISO. You can fail the ISO audit by not controlling your documents. That means what version is it, who signed off on it, and you have to review all documents and have them re-signed off on at least once annually. Okay, right. At least once annually. Because what if you had two access control policies floating around from 2 different years on 2 different scopes, or and then you had new emerging threats and you'd never addressed them, so you'd have 2 access control policies floating around. So you can fail ISO on that. There's 2 things going on here. It's not the world's greatest. ISO 27001 is not the world's greatest system because you're flexible in how you treat risk and things like that. However, it requires you to go through the plan, do, check, act steps, see? And that's what companies want. And then it's only the legal regulatory within the scope that are auditable. So if we do a business process scope, that doesn't mean that, let's just use Microsoft. It doesn't mean that we're going to apply with all the legal regulatory requirements of all of Microsoft. It's only the legal regulatory requirements within the scope. Okay, so if we just say it's this product, it's only the legal regulatory that involves with that product. Okay, so then only these ones now are going to be auditable down here. Okay. And we do not only have to show that we can monitor and measure it, by the way. We do not need an attestation. We only have to show that we can monitor and measure it, which means that we can do a mapping to it. Okay. Leadership here. This is kind of a benign, sits all by itself. Information security policy. This is a executive directive to protect information. Typically, in the information security policy from the executive management, we're only looking for things like we're going to preserve CIA. We're going to maintain compliance with legal regulatory within the scope. We're going to be ISO 27001 certified, that kind of thing. We don't need anything more than that because it's just executive management telling us at a very high level what to do. Okay? They're not going to be doing it down here. They're just giving us, and then they're saying we're going to provide you adequate resources, money, people, things, so that you can protect those things. Roles, responsibilities also pushed down from executive management, and we typically just lay these out for all the different parties that are involved. Risk assessment here. This is the heart of ISO 27001. Once you decide what the scope is, we are only going to deal with the risk assessment for the assets within the scope. Okay, so this is the a simple chronological order here. Before we go to the assets here, we can plug these in here, and we're talking people, networks, cables, facilities, hardware, software, information itself, and GRC requirements become an asset, right? Once we comply with them, they're an asset to us. Okay, so those are going to populate the asset inventory. Now we're ready for the risk assessment. However, ISO requires a risk assessment approach. So what we're talking about here is a few things. Impact likelihood scale here. Impact scale. How does it affect your business, right? Money, loss of customers, reputational. It can be all kinds of things. It could be
regulatory fines.
It can be regulatory fines. It can be anything and everything, because it could be the military, it could be the Humane Society, it could be 10 dead dogs. Decide for yourself, okay? So there is no thing you have to comply with for impact scale, but it typically involves a financial amount. And we like to use the product or professional liability policy, okay? How much per claim, how much in the aggregate. Aggregate is the sum of all claims, by the way. So that's a great impact to use, because if you ever have a claim against you, your insurance policy is going to go into effect, right? So it's a great to use your insurance policy. What limits do you buy for that product and service that you sell clients? So drop that in there. It's a great one.
What's the average you're using per record?
Well, the minimum for most product and service product and professional liability, that's errors and omissions, is $1 million per claim, $1 million in the ag. That's the minimum. That's the tiniest. Okay, if you're working with big companies, you're going to see $5 million per claim, $5 million in the ag, something like that. And if you're dealing with like a PricewaterhouseCoopers or something like that, the 1,000 transactions worldwide, you're going to see 20 million ag, which is sum of all claims. You might see one. It depends on what they want to do, but it might be 2 million per claim, 20 million in the ag.
What about dollar value per record, say somebody's address and phone number and name?
We don't get that. That's too low, I think. That's too low level. We don't get into that. But you could do that. That could make total sense.
Sure.
If your scope said those are the things we're really cared about, you could actually put those right in there and say, if we lost his phone number, blah, 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 that's it's $1 million claim. Sure, totally. It's very dependent upon what your business is, what your risk tolerance level is, all those things. The insurance you buy, it can be all over the board. So impact scale, likelihood scale, then these two together, you get to choose your own risk acceptance criteria, okay? So that is, where is your risk tolerance? Again, it could be high, it could be low. It just depends on what your company wants to do. ISO cannot tell you what to do, by the way. You get to choose it for yourself. However, your clients might tell you what to do. Your clients might say you have to do this. Okay. Risk treatment options. We use 4 risk treatment options out of 27,005. That's the international assessment guidance for ISO 27001. There's 4 typical that are internationally accepted, and they are treat risk, right? Or reduce risk, accept risk as is, and yes, you can accept risk as is above the your own risk acceptance criteria. You can transfer risk and you can terminate risk. Those are the 4. Reduce, accept, transfer, terminate. Okay, that's an internationally accepted risk treatment options. Okay, if you have more money, you're going to reduce risk, right? You're going to treat it. If you what is it? Sorry, I missed that.
That's another way to spell accept.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, and you can accept risk, and so it could be too expensive for one thing. That could be a very common thing. It's too expensive to treat the risk, so we're going to buy an insurance policy.
That's transfer.
It is. It can be both, kind of, or you could accept it.
You can accept it.
As is, and you say, hey, we don't have $2 million.
If you think your company assets are enough to absorb the damage, you accept it. If you think it's not, you get insurance and you transfer it.
There you go.
Or you stop the practice, which is termination, or you implement countermeasures, which is to reduce risk.
It's all over the board, and that's why when somebody says, I'm ISO 27001 certified, the first thing you ask is, what's your scope? And if they let you dive, if you have a specific risk that you're interested in, ask them what they did about it. Because they couldn't accept it as is. They want to.
I love it.
ISO has a requirement right here in the risk treatment plan. Any risk that you treat has to be accepted by management. That's called residual risk. So if you decide, if you're the IT manager or the InfoSec manager, and you decide we're going to just accept this as is, that doesn't fly. It still has to be accepted by executive management, as they have to agree that they're going to accept residual risk, regardless of what you do. In which case, the fiduciary, right, they're fiduciarily responsible. You could sue them. So just because you're ISO 27001 doesn't mean you're going to win a lawsuit, okay? Certified, it doesn't mean, that's 2 different things. 2 different things. Okay, risk assessment. Now we're ready for the risk assessment, right? We have an approach. We have an asset inventory. We're going to do risk assessment. We're covering 2 types of risk: the risk of noncompliance within the scope and the risk to CIA. We typically do 3 steps here. Raw risk, which is no controls. So we don't want to treat risk unless we know we have risk in the first place. So one of the problems that people do, and as this gentleman brought up earlier, is people have policies, but they don't know why they have them, right? So in the true ISO perspective, there's no such thing as a policy without a risk to an asset within the scope. Okay, this is chronological. You have a scope, then you have an asset inventory, then you do risk assessment to the 2 types of risk, then you go through this little scenario here, then you have controls. Okay, so a great question is, why are you doing that? Why are you doing cybersecurity? Why are you getting NDAs? Why are you locking the door every night at 9 a.m.? If you can't answer those questions, you can't do this. See? It's a chronological order.
So I've done thousands of risk assessments in my life, and typically you will get to your residual risk after you look at the controls that they believe they have in place.
The residual risk is after RTP. So the residual risk is right here for in ISO.
So I guess what's confusing me is the fact that I see no controls, compensating controls, if you will, within the middle part there.
Well,
To help you get to what you feel is an acceptable.
yeah, it's right here though. So let's just say we have, do we have any risk at all? We have a threat and vulnerability to an asset. Do we even have any risk? Are we below our own risk acceptance criteria? Yes or no? If we're not, we got to go, okay, what current controls do we currently have in place? If we have any current controls that's going to reduce the risk, then we have to ask ourselves again, are we at risk acceptance criteria? Yes or no? Okay, but these current controls are populating here. See how they're going right here?
Controls in the middle there, right?
Yeah, these are current controls. So people usually have best practice, some kind of controls. But if they don't, see, but we're doing it in order, and then we're going, okay, these current controls, let's just throw this bucket over here, because we don't want to say we need them yet. We're doing these controls, so let's just take that, put it over here. We're doing this control, so if we're actually doing them, then we can say, oh, the reason we're doing these controls is because we have a threat and vulnerability to CIA, to this asset within the scope. Then we'll say, okay, let's put that in the policy. Okay? So we're going to when we do this, we take those controls, and sometimes we figure out, hey, you don't need those controls. Why you can't answer why you're doing them. If you're currently doing them, best practice. See? So we're remaking the policy here. We're remaking the policies when we do this. I'm not, okay. Okay, so then the third category here is going to be anything that's not current controls, and if it's not at risk, then we get to decide what 4 risk treatment options that we just talked about we're going to use. Okay? And if you add controls, they're going to go into policies, process, procedures here. And then we're going to be able to tell anybody, here's the control we have to this threat and vulnerability, to this asset within the scope. See? So we should be able to tell that story, and that helps us do things like questionnaires, right? Now we can start doing questionnaires. Oh, here's what we do. We have this asset. Oh, you guys buy this. Here's where it goes. We did this risk assessment. Here's what the controls that we have to protect your information. Okay, so we want to be able to tell that story, and then we can fill out those questionnaires. So people do 27001 to help them fill out questionnaires because they're bombarded by it. Okay, last little thing here. We map these controls. You have to map these controls up to Annex A because we have to do this SOA. Okay, this is a requirement. This is mapping of which of the 114 Annex A controls apply to us or don't apply to us based on the risk assessment to our scope. Okay. So the 114 controls don't automatically apply to you. Only the ones that apply to your scope. So if you did secure conference rooms with no computers, all of the IT controls are out. They don't apply. There's no computers. How could they? Okay. Annex A controls here, this is what we use as our middleman. You can also use, as I told you earlier, the United, there's one that's called the Unified Control Framework. If you don't buy a software, you can actually just buy the mapping from the Unified Control Framework. It's expensive. It's like $5,000. It's just a one-time price, and then you can get any mapping you want to in Excel. Okay, but then you just get in Excel, and then you got to do whatever you want to do with it. Okay, we map everything to Annex A instead of the UCF. Okay, and every software has to do it. You have to use something. We use the middleman because we're doing 27001. We have to do it anyways. And we map Annex A to the lowest level of any requirement here: GDPR, cloud security, PCI, HIPAA. And so what happens is that because we're already choosing these controls because of one of these 2 things, we already have them mapped to Annex A. We just plop them in here and say, here's what you got. So it's easy for us to do it that way. Okay, so not only can we do a statement of applicability for Annex A, which of the Annex A controls apply to us, we can do a statement of applicability to GRC requirements because we can say we have this asset, here's the threat and vulnerability to CIA, here's the risk assessment, here's the CIA ranking, here's how it maps to Annex A. We can actually show each control here what assets apply to it, right? Because Annex A is our middleman. So we can do that very easily in a software. That's why the software, but software is not right for everybody. We use risk assessment for probably, Excel worksheet for probably about 25% of our clients. They don't need it. They don't have to map to anything. Okay, quickly here, how much time we got here? A couple of minutes. Okay, ISO 27001, very flexible. Okay, it's the only internationally accepted management system requirements. It is the umbrella over all GRC requirements. It can be, okay? So we can manage those things very easily. So here's a couple things. It's applicable to any type of company of any size. An organization gets to choose how they do scope. That's a generic requirement. Okay, they can do their whole company. They can do a business process. They can do the IT department. It's up to them. Okay, risk assessment treatment allows you to choose 4 options: accept, reduce, transfer, terminate. Only GRC requirements and scopes are auditable, so you can, again, depending on what you want auditable, you can choose, that helps you kind of decide what your scope is. Minimum maintenance is at least once annually. Everything in the ISMS has at least a once annually maintenance. Okay, so if you're a little small company, you're going to just pick it up once a year, part of the certification audit. So it's very flexible, it's great. So it's a very flexible, good standard, and it will manage everything underneath that umbrella. So it's really great. Okay, we already talked about this a little bit. These are the ones that it actually leverages 27001. 22301, we can actually leverage the same scope. If we do the business process right, we can literally do the same scope for 22301, which is availability, right? Business continuity. Okay, it's a requirement of ISO, by the way. It's a requirement. You cannot not do the business continuity Annex A requirement.
How is all this comparing to the new cybersecurity NIST 853?
Very, very few companies actually do NIST that we work with, even the biggest companies in the world. The reason is because why complicate it? Okay, NIST is more complicated.
This is also hard to break up into
Yeah.
that product because it assumes it's the whole organization is going to follow 800-53.
But if you're working with the government, you have to do NIST. And a lot of HIPAA does NIST too. But we would never do that if it wasn't a requirement for our client. And the reason is why go through all the extra steps to get to the same controls? See, we're still going to have the same risk treatment options.
What I'm starting to see is people go down both paths. Just to see it, just to have it, take bits and pieces out of it, build their own policies.
That's how you should do NIST.
Yeah.
If you're a private organization without federal government requirements, nitpick.
Well, we got a ton of federal
You can't.
governmental requirements.
It's very hard to afford NIST.
You're right. That's the problem with NIST, and that's the problem with like FSMA and stuff like that, or I should say like FedRAMP. I mean, FedRAMP certification costs like $800,000, something like that. Consulting plus certification.
Well,
It's outrageous.
Certification is nothing. It's the implementation of the controls.
The problem is it's prescriptive, and that's what ISO is not prescriptive. See, you can choose. It's generic because any company can do it. If you say some of these other ones, see, can every company do NIST? No, it's too big. It's too expensive. You can't do it, and that's why it doesn't make sense for most companies.
You're saying it's prescriptive, NIST is?
It's just to comply with it is more. It's a bigger. See, remember now we're talking generic requirements. You can do it all kinds of different ways, right? So in our risk assessment, we're probably about 140 threats and vulnerabilities. That's if every asset applies to you, because simplicity matters to our clients, and it's a continuous improvement cycle. So it's more important to get certified first, and then improve as needed, as required within your budget in the future. But certification is first, then improvement, because it's meant to be a continuous improvement cycle. It's not meant to be the world's greatest system. See, very few do NIST unless they have to.
I'm starting to see people go both ways because there's benefits in doing.
If our client did want to do that and they didn't have to, they would do that as an improvement later on to be more best in class or to be more inclusive. But we would never recommend that to somebody because it complicates everything. See, it's bigger. Now if you said you were doing NIST, all of a sudden you have to apply to all of NIST, and now you have all these other audit failure possibilities, right? So the bigger you make it, so really simplicity at first, keep it as simple as absolute possible, and then if you want to graduate to that, even if you don't want to do it, you can do it. Well, we tell some of our clients here, if you want to be best in class, you can do GDPR, even if it's not a requirement to you. Why? Because it includes people's privacy information. Then you can do 2718, which is privacy in the cloud. You can do Cloud Security Alliance. That's best in class kind of stuff, even if it's not required. But you do that after. Get certified, add it on. And you can also expand scope. So a lot of people will start with a really small scope here, and then they'll add on, we're going to add in help desk. Now, they're applying the policies to everybody, but they're just saying this is auditable the first year. Only these 100 people in scope. Now there's 50 people in the help desk, they'll add this scope the next year because they're applying the policy to everybody. See? So we're only auditing the assets within here.
What if it has a lot of additional costs associated with not doing it earlier?
Usually not. When you do it through a risk assessment, we're going through generic assets usually. So we're saying all laptops, all hard tops, all people, all networks and stuff like that. So a lot of times we're choosing a policy. It's an access control policy. It might be applied to everybody, but we're only going to, for the audit, just because we have to build records before we can get certified, we're only going to make sure that these 100 people have the NDAs first. And then we'll apply it out. And then next year, if we feel good about it, we might add in help desk or something like that, or sales or whatever it might be. So you can expand scope, and you can add in a more complex risk assessment later on, which is a great thing to do if you don't think you're covering it well. But again, those are added things. Keep it simple. Simplicity is absolutely one of the most important things. You try to build a big system, you will fail, I guarantee you. You're going to fail. One of the things that we, when you do incident management is one of the greatest ways to understand your risks. So one of the things that we do, and I'm trying to sell you our software, but I'm just telling you, one of the things we do in our software is we map when you put an incident in, it has to map back to a threat and vulnerability within your scope. See, so you have to say, oh, it's laptops, it's this threat and vulnerability, and it's these 10 laptops that it affected. See, because that way, and then you look at an incident management report, that's a great way. That's like one of the number one ways to realize what you need to do when you have a good, and incident management is one of the criteria of all management systems. You have to do incident management.
Which dovetails into 22301.
It does dovetail, yeah. 22301 is an add-on. You have to do business continuity too, but we can expand it. See, so 22301 can be very easily done if you do a business process for scope instead of the whole company. You just say it's only this business process. We can do 22301 very simply, a couple weeks. Okay, any other questions, guys? This is pretty much the end of it here.
5-day course of GDPR.
Yeah, we teach all kinds of stuff like this, guys. You can iCertWorks if you want to see it. We have a 5-day GDPR course. But anyways, we have all kinds of stuff on iCertWorks. That's one of our sister companies. So, okay, thanks everybody. I appreciate it.
You got a lot of fun.